Building wealth can feel like a daunting, even impossible challenge, especially if you're at the beginning of your investment journey. It can seem like everyone around you is getting wealthier and you're simply not. The idea of saving 100k, let alone $1 million, seems impossible unless you do something like start a business, get lucky and win the lottery, or inherit cash from a long-lost relative abroad. How are you meant to build wealth with an average 9-to-5 job? This conundrum has always been the case. Over 20 years ago, the late Charlie Munger, the billionaire investor and vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, famously said, "Saving that first 100k is challenging but necessary. It's a bitch, but you gotta do it." He also went on to say, "I don't care what you have to do if it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon. Find a way to get your hands on 100k. And although that quote was from over 20 years ago, it is as true now as it was then. But as great a quote that is, how does that actually help you now? It can feel like if you save 10k a year, it will take you 10 years to save 100k or 100 years to save $1 million. In this video, I'm gonna help you reimagine how you can get to $1 million by revealing the math that proves how it is easier than you might think. I'll keep this brief. Albert Einstein said, "Compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe." He also said, "He who understands compound interest earns it. He who doesn't pays it." So what is compound interest? Well, in a nutshell, it is interest on interest. And this graphic does a great job of visually showing you the difference between linear growth and exponential growth. So the way to look at this is the yellow part is the raw money you put in, the consistent savings you invest from your salary, for instance. You're basically exchanging your time working for money that you're then investing. And that original amount is increasing in that linear fashion. The purple bit is the interest your original raw money has made, but better yet, the interest is making, and that's why it's exponentially growing. At first, the interest you earn seems so small, and that is why it's so hard to get to that first 100k. But as the small amount of interest you earn then makes more interest and then makes more interest, it quickly surpasses the amount of money your original raw money is able to make, because the interest you make, the returns you make, grows exponentially. Another way to get your head around the power of compounding is if you start at $1 and just keep doubling the number. So for example, $1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, that becomes 8, that becomes 16, that becomes 64, that becomes 128, then 256, then 512, then 1024, then 2048, then 4096, then 8192, then 16,384, then 32,768. And that's me just doubling it 15 times. So you can see how mad that gets. In fact, if you double $1 not 15 times, but 30 times, it equates to just over $1 billion, which seems counterintuitive. But mathematically, it's 100% accurate. And that is why Albert Einstein said compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. So now we understand the power of compounding. How can we create a plan to help you reach your first hard 100k, to then go on to make your first easy $1 million? The first step is investing. If your goal is to be wealthy, you need to stop thinking about your bank balance, but pivot to thinking about your net worth from now on. Although that seems like the same thing, it isn't, and it will become clearer as to what I mean as I explain further. The reality is, millionaires don't rely on just a salary to build wealth. They build wealth through multiple sources of income to accumulate wealth. So you should be aiming to not just generate wealth from your 9-to-5 job, but from other income generating assets and investments. Planning your finances and having clear financial goals is important, but there is one magical ingredient to unlocking the power of compounding, and that, my friends, is investing. Investing can seem scary and risky for many people. Many people feel they lack investing knowledge or know how to get involved or are afraid of losing money. It can seem like locking your money in a savings account is easier and risk-free for you, but in reality, a traditional savings account is often the opposite of saving and compounding, as the interest rate is almost always lower than inflation. So your money isn't increasing over time, it's actually shrinking year by year. Taking the first step to investing, like with most things in life, is always the most difficult step. It is easier to just stick with what you know rather than what you don't, especially when a big figure like $1 million or pounds can seem so distant. It makes it so easy for you to just put it off. But investing doesn't need to be scary. With a little bit of insight and support, you can start investing any day you want and start working towards your first 100K. So why is the first 100K such a bitch to accumulate? Now, not my words, but Charlie Munger's, because it is the stage you are building the most important part of your wealth, the foundations, but also the part you achieve the least reward and can see the least evidence that things are actually on track. Take a look at this graph. This shows $1,000 compounding at a rate of 10% a year with nothing added. So if you just put $1,000 into an investment and that investment returned 10% a year every year for 70 years, and all you did was reinvest the money it was making back into the investment, that $1,000 would become $800,000 70 years later. And it was this graphic Warren Buffett saw when he was a kid. But of course, you don't want to wait 70 years, which is why having discipline as early in life as possible to begin investing is so important. Let's look at two examples to illustrate how important it is to start early. Jessica starts investing at 25 years old, and she invests 5K and then follows that up by investing 2.5K every year until she's 65. Whereas Newman starts investing at 35 years old, and to make up for that lost time, he invests not 5 but 10 grand and follows up by investing not 2.5 but 5K a year until he's 65. Who do you think has accumulated the most wealth by the time they are 65? Take a moment to actually give your best estimate or guess. Surely it's Newman. He is putting in twice as much a year. But in fact, the answer is actually Jessica. Even though Newman invested double as much as Jessica, because he started 10 years later, he actually ended up worse off. This is why Albert Einstein said compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. So how do you then get your first million? Well, it depends on how fast you want to do it. Based on a 7% annual return, which is quite conservative if you invest in an index fund, the graph shows how much you would need to invest a year to reach $1 million, dependent on the amount of time you give it. So if you've got 50 years, you only need to invest $2,150 a year, so a total of $107,500 to reach $1 million 50 years later, compared to needing to invest $33,800 a year over 15 years to total $507,000 to reach then the million. For every 10 years you wait to invest, you have to nearly double the amount you invest to accomplish the exact same goal over a shorter time period. So just let that sink in for a moment. I hope you found this information useful, but before you go, a final key question for you. What do you think about all this? Comment below and like and subscribe to see more of me.